there, thanks for joining me today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator. I'm based in the UK. I'm joining you today for my Monday Mashup, and I have something a little bit different for you. We're actually going to be making a 3D item today, but we are going to do a few little twists on this one. You may have seen that I made this little tree ornament for my recent Christmas in July class. It was just a display item actually, but what I did do is I made each attendee one of these which hung from their kit bag, and I personalised it with their name, so it was quite a sweet thing to do. I think they quite enjoyed it. It was a bit of fun really, but I've had lots of questions about this, so I thought it'd be really good for my Monday mashup this week just to show you how it goes together. Now when I made this, I used wood stain to stain this, but I wanted to incorporate some more Stampin' Up products today, so we're going to be using some more bits and pieces that you'll see as we go along. It's a little bit of an experiment, so we'll have a play and see how we go. Okay, so in case you hadn't realised, which I'm sure you have by now, this is actually made from lolly sticks, so ice lollies, and they come obviously like this once you've finished your lolly. Now I haven't eaten all these lollies. These are just bought in for craft purposes like this, so obviously they're you know, bought in specifically for this purpose. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to start with our pieces first. So we need 2 pieces for the bottom of our sleigh, so I'm going to pop them to one side, and they stay whole, but what we do need to do is to cut some of these so they're a little bit smaller. So you don't have to do these to the exact measurement, so I've got 2 long ones here and they go right under this section here, so they're about 9 centimeters. So if we're talking inches, you're probably talking sort of best part of 4 inches, but it doesn't really matter, the length isn't important, but what we do need to do is to cut some. So I'm going to measure first of all and mark it with a pencil, and I want to mark it at 9 centimeters. Okay, so this is going to be my first one, and again I'm not worried too much about precision because these are for fun, so obviously we're just going to remove the pieces we don't need. Now these are really old scissors. These have been through the mill, they've done lots of things, they're not particularly sharp, but they will cut through the lolly stick wood. Now I don't recommend you use any of your scissors to do this unless you have got an old pair like I have, but what I did do for the class was we used a little hacksaw just to take the ends off. So whatever you have to hand, and I'm just going to use this for quickness, but if you support your lolly stick as you cut, then you don't get any splitting. You sometimes get a bit of splitting if you don't do that, so just bear that in mind. So as I say, this is for quickness tonight. So I'm just going to trim the other one. There we go. I said tonight because it is actually nearly 11 o'clock in the evening here. I'm in the UK and we have had a very, very hot day today. And I literally could not face coming into my craft room any earlier. So that's why it's so late here. Okay, so next I need to make these 2 in the middle here. Now I know that they are about 1 centimetre shorter. I'm going to pass on that lolly stick, it's a little bit of a funny shape. You do sometimes get odd ones which are a bit of a strange shape. And I'm going to mark this one at about 8 centimetres, but as I say, it really doesn't matter. Now I'm going to try and be careful because these end sections here I can use for this top piece, so I'm going to try so that I don't split it too much. So there's one piece, that's obviously my smaller bit. I'm just going to use this one as a guide just to cut that. Okay, so that is in fact all our pieces. Okay, so we have 2 full lolly sticks, we have 2 at 9 centimetres, 2 at 8 centimetres, and then the little pieces here are the offcut from the 8 centimetres. Okay, So the next thing we need to do is to stick them together. Now for this we will need another little bit of lolly stick just to support it at the back here. And I'm actually going to be using another piece here. I found that when I did the ones for their bags, they needed a little bit more support just on this section here. So we're going to get two little pieces, which are going to be about 3 centimetres. So I don't mind if they've got a round end or not a round end, it really doesn't matter. So roughly about 3 centimetres. Okay, so I just need 2 of these bits. They do flick if you're not careful, so just be aware of that. And I'm just going to line that up with the bottom one, just to cut that as well. Okay, so they're our little supports. I'm going to put them separately so that we know which ones are which. Now what I'm going to use to put it together is actually wood glue. Now I did experiment with this and I did use a hot glue gun, which we're going to be using a little bit later on for some other pieces, but it was quite fiddly and I did end up actually burning my fingers at one point. So I don't recommend you use a hot gun for this particular piece, but you know, we will move on to that. So what I want to do is to, as I say, use some wood glue. So this is just normal wood adhesive. And I'm just using a little cocktail stick here. And I'm just going to lay some glue. Now wood glue is quite strong. So once it's stuck, it's stuck. It does take a little while to cure. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so I'm just going to put the 2 shorter ones on to start with. Now if it helps, what you can do is just to place your other end here. And we don't want to glue it at this point because I want to use it to trap my thread onto in a second. So we're still just working with the glue on that middle one, but this is just giving it support. And then I'm going to stick these 2 outer ones on. As I say, it does take a little while to go off, but once it's gone off, it has gone off. If you used something like Tombow, which is our fantastic glue, which we all love, of course, as you know, that remains tacky. So you would end up with a bit of a sticky mess. So try and avoid using that. You could use red tape, so it's like really, really strong adhesive. But I recommend wood glue, as it is wood that we're actually sticking. Okay, so I'm just going to turn that over. That one's just fallen off there, as you can see. Don't worry too much because they're not going to take much sticking once they're done. Okay, so I'm going to let that go off for a minute. Okay, so hopefully that's going off now. As I say, it takes a few minutes, so just be patient with it. Don't try and move it too quick. As I say, it's very hot here today, so my glue is drying quicker than I need it to, really, so bear with it. Okay, and the next thing we want to do is to stick our actual sled pieces on. So again, I'm just using wood glue just along this edge. I'm not going right to the end because they do hang over. And then I'm just going to position that upright. Now obviously when I was doing a lot of these, I did all the cutting, then I did all the gluing, and then I actually allowed them just to glue overnight because I wasn't in any hurry to do them. So you know, if you're making some, you might just want to do that. But as I say, it does go off reasonably quickly. So I just want to make sure that this is lined up with that one across there. And also, if you can, just try and sort of get this gap either side roughly the same. Don't panic over it. It's not majorly important, but if you can, that's great. Okay, now I'm going to try and gently turn this over. Okay, so I can see it's starting to go off. Don't worry if you get a little bit of extra glue. It does dry clear, so don't worry about it. It's not like the Tombow, as I say. This is my other support piece, but these are the pieces that are going to go on top. So I'm just going to add some glue to those two. Now, when I did my original one of these, I actually trapped the cord, the hanging cord, underneath this section here, but I did find that it sometimes made it sort of not hang straight, if that makes sense. So I found it much better to do it on the underneath, and as I say, it gives that extra support as well. Okay, so as I say, at this stage I would allow this to dry properly, just so that it gets a chance to really adhere to itself. And if they're sort of slightly out, you can always move them a little bit. Don't worry about that gap in the middle because we're going to cover that. Okay, so the next thing I need to do, I'm going to do this now just to allow me enough time to allow it to dry. I want to cut myself a hanger. So you can do this at sort of whatever length you want to, but I would say, if I give it a quick measure for you, you want about 18, 19 centimetres, something like that. Now, this is the cord. This is actually taken from the Simply Elegant trim. So you get it in silver and gold. So it's a really lovely sort of Christmassy thing. And I am just going to use my hot glue gun at this stage just to put a row of glue across this top section here. And then I'm going to just quickly add my cord or my trim. Now you might just need to persuade it to go in the right direction because it does have a habit of twisting on itself. And then once you're happy, you can then place your other spacer. Now, I think I may have got mine muddled up because this one is a little bit long. Let's take the end off that. Okay. So as you can see, that's all now glued. If you get any extra hot glue like I have here, just remove that while it's still malleable. And there we go, that is our hanger. So that will be nice and secure now. So that will mean that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so I know this isn't quite dry, so I am being particularly careful of it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow it to dry completely, and then I'll come back and show you the next stage. Okay, so I've just allowed this to dry for a little while. It still is a little bit sort of soft. It's only been there about 5 minutes, but I think it's enough for me just to get moving on painting it. So I'm going to be using two products today. I'm going to be using our Early Espresso Reinker, and I'm also going to be using our Whisper White ink from our Whisper White ink pad. Now, if you recall, I use this quite a lot for different projects, but it's also quite good as a paint. And you just water it down and it just creates like a nice sort of wash, really. So what we're going to do, I've just got water, And I'm just mixing some of this re-inker. Now I only put about 2 spots on here, and I'm just mixing quite a lot of water in it. I want it to be quite sort of light, and it also, where I had some white on my brush, it has actually picked up some of that, but that's fine because this is a base, so we're not worried too much. We want it quite watery, and what we're going to do is we're going to just paint it onto our sleigh, or sled, I don't know what you want to call it really. And just be careful, try and avoid your gold thread. As I say, this is a wash, so don't worry if you don't get every single little bit. It's really just a base for our white, so don't panic. And obviously being quite watery, it will just soak into our base. So I want this to be quite rough because I want it to be quite vintagey. That's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so this is our base now that we've put down, and I'm quite happy that that's just covered that sufficiently. And then we're going to move on to our Whisper White. Now you can go straight in with this straight after your brown. Just missed entirely a piece there, which I'm just going to lightly cover. There we go. So this is white. Now this is chalky paint, so it's obviously it's quite thick compared to our actual re-inker. So just mix in some water with it, and then we're going to paint it over the top of our brown. So as I say, that brown has just given it that base, and then we're just covering it in the white. Now this probably will take 2 coats because again, it will soak it up, but also because it's a chalk base, it will dry a lot lighter than what it goes on. But we want it to be patchy. This is going to be quite rustic, so don't worry too much if so I'm obviously using our Whisper White paint just because I wanted to use some more of our products just to show you how they can be used and how flexible they are. If I was doing a large amount of these, then I would probably look to buy a little pot of chalk paint. Again, this is the back as well, remember, so don't worry too much. We're going to do a second coat in a while. Okay, so that's had its first coat of paint. Now I want to allow that to dry for just a little while, just to make sure that I'm not washing off what I've just put on basically. But if we let it dry, you'll see how it will start to change colour, and you'll see a lot more of this brown coming through here. Okay, so we'll let that dry, and I'm going to talk to you while that's drying just about what decoration I've used. And again, I'm going to change this up slightly. So these two here, these two greenery pieces are actually from the Iconic dies. So these have been cut out in soft succulent. So I've got 2 of those. And then I've got 3 holly leaves here, which are taken from the Christmas trimmings dies. Again, I'm not going to use those this time. I'm just going to change it up a little bit. This one here is also from these dies. And I actually cut it in white and then just used pens to colour it, purely because I wanted red tips with green stems. So that's how I did that one there. But as I say, we are going to be using some other bits and pieces that you acquire over time when you're a crafter. And sometimes it's nice just to use up bits and pieces that you've got hanging around. I'm going to leave this top section because this is still drying. This is nearly dry, so I'm just going to go over it again. But again, just very lightly. I don't want it to be too perfect. I want it to be quite rustic. I'm just going to go over those now because I can. And then again, these sections, I'm not going to worry too much. I missed that side entirely the first time round. And so this is the back, so we're not too worried about the back. We just want the front to be nice. You can see how that brown sort of starts to peek through a little bit. Okay, I think that will be sufficient, but we'll soon see. If it dries too light, then we'll add some more. So the pieces I'm going to use today, as I say, I'm going to use these 2 from the Iconic dies in soft succulent. And then I've raided my craft box and I've come across some little pine cones. I live very near the forest here. And although these aren't actually from our forest, because I don't recommend you pick them up, these are actually sourced from a reputable company that stocks and dries them properly for you. So I'm not suggesting you should go and pick them up off your forest floor, but I thought they'd be quite nice on here. I'm going to actually break them off that main stem. I will keep that stem because you never know, it might come in useful. So I'm going to use those, and also these are stamens for flowers. So if you're a flower maker, these are the little stamens that you get in them. And I'm actually going to use those as little berries today. So if I don't know where you acquire these things from, but we do. Okay. Right, okay, so let's say that's nearly dry. It's not quite, but it's getting there. I think I can take a chance on it and start actually building up what I want to build onto it. Okay, so I'm going to be using Tombow to stick this down, and I'm hoping it is dry enough. As I say, I would normally allow it a little bit longer to dry. This always happens. I've got a new one here, so we should hopefully... That's better. Okay, so I'm just adding some glue just to the back of this. You don't want too much because obviously it can creep through the little gaps. Just going to use some tweezers. So I'm going to start my first one down here because I want it to come down quite a way down my actual sled. Now, if this isn't quite dry, it might not stick initially, so we might have to give it a little persuasion. I'm not too worried if some leaves sort of stick up a little bit because it's nature, so remember we're sort of... And then this one I'm going to start right on that gap so that we can hide that gap a little bit. And then I'm just going to sort of naturally let it sort of fall off to the side. Okay, it will dry naturally anyway once we've got going. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add my little pine cones. So I think these will look nice sort of here. I'm just going to whip off the last bits off the end. But I am going to have to glue these with hot glue because obviously they're quite 3D. So we just need to make sure that we sort of get them glued in place. So I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue. This may smoke a little bit because obviously it's going onto a natural thing. And I'm just going to stick it quite near the top, but I don't want it right at the top because I'm going to be tying my ribbon around here. And I'm going to do the same with the next one. Just obviously mind your fingers when you're doing this. And this one I'm just going to stick to the side of it. The hot glue obviously does go off quite quickly, so you know, you don't need to worry too much. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put a few berries coming out from underneath where those pine cones are, so they're going to be sort of here. Did you see that moth? Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim these. So I've just got some little wire cutters here. I want to give myself a little bit of stem on them because I need somewhere for them to glue. I'm going to start with 3 and then we'll see how we go. So now they're solid, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop some hot glue just into this gap here. Okay, and then I'm going to, I've got the door open so the moths are being very much attracted to the light here. Just going to poke these into the middle. Come on, off you go. I think 3 is just sufficient. Now, I don't know if you can see, this isn't sticking properly because it's still a little bit damp underneath. So I am just going to pop a little bit of hot glue because I know that that is hidden under my pine cones. And then I know that that's going to stick okay. When this is dried entirely, then I'll come back and I will make sure that they're all stuck completely on. Okay, so that's that one done. Now what I want to do is to tie my bow. So I used the beautiful evening evergreen sheer ribbon on this one, but I'm actually going to be using this lovely red one. Now you may remember this from last year. This is actually returned this year, which I'm very pleased about because I still had a roll on my shelf and also it was one of my favourites. So I've just cut myself a length, probably about 30 centimetres, 12 inches, and I'm actually going to cut it in half down the middle because it's about a centimetre wide, the ribbon, and I think it looks nicer if we can sort of have 2 lengths of it, but 2 lengths at full size would be too heavy. So I'm just cutting this down the middle. It will fray a little bit, but don't worry about that. Has a little mind of its own sometimes. Okay, and then I'm also going to cut myself another length of the gold thread. So there, I've got 2 lengths of the red and a length of the gold. And all I want to do is to tie it into a bow around my hanger. Now this is a little bit fiddly because obviously you've got 3 lengths, and 3 lengths that have a mind of their own because of the nature of their makeup. So just bear with it and try and tie it the best you can. Now try and get your towels the same length, and then you can pull it tight around there. And then once you're happy that it's pulled tight, which I am now, I'm just going to move it down to the bottom so that it's next to the top of my sled. And then I'm going to try and tie a bow without getting everything caught up. Just make sure you grab all 3 sections. There we go, it wasn't too painful. So once you've got it into place, it has moved up a little bit again. I will move that back down. You can then start sort of manipulating the sort of size of your bow. So just take each little one in turn and just adjust it how you would like it to look. Okay, and then you might just need to tighten it again. Okay, no, I think that's fine. So I'm just going to push it back down to where it should be at the top of my actual sled. And then I'm going to trim these ends. Making sure I don't cut the wrong ones. Move everything out the way. So there you go, that's our little vintage sled. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some snow to it. So at this stage, if you wanted to, you could add a little greeting. So like this one, I put a little season's greetings, and all I did was emboss that in Versamark and white embossing powder. So you can do that if you wanted to. Or equally, you can just leave it blank, which is what I'm going to do for this particular one. But what I want to do is to add some snow. So this is our embossing paste, and this is our shimmery one. So this is our shimmery white embossing paste. And I'm just going to just give it a quick mix just to make sure it's all nice and soft. Okay, and then all I did for my greenery was just to stroke a little bit of it over all the pieces. Now I want a little bit to go on my berries as well. And you might find dabbing these is the best way to go because it's sort of a shiny surface it's going on to. Okay, and then I'm going to add some to my pine cones as well. And again, sort of the little dabbing motion is probably the best thing. And what it will do, it will stick just to the pieces that are sticking up. And equally at this stage, if you get any pieces of glue or anything that you're not happy with, you can blob a little bit of snow over the top of it, and nobody will know. So you can add as much or as little snow as you want to. I'm going to add some also just to the top of my sled here. It adds to the sparkle and also just looks really wintry, which is what I loved. As I say, just use the dabbing motion because then you get sort of like little peaks on it. There we go. So now that is done. So if I hold that one up, as I say, I would allow this to dry just a little bit longer. You could use whatever colour you wanted. So if you wanted even sort of like a pinky base or something like that, you could equally use some Rinco in a pinky colour. This interestingly has turned it sort of grey colour, which I really like. So you know, have a little play, see what colours you like. Here's the original one again. And you can see they just look really, really pretty. And you can imagine that hanging on a Christmas tree. It's going to look really beautiful. So I hope you like that today. As I say, it's something completely different because I don't normally do 3D projects with you. It's just that I'd had quite a lot of requests to show how it was made. So I thought it was the ideal opportunity to do that. So I hope you like that. And I'll see you next week for another Monday Mashup. Take care. Bye.